Now.
We recording, Janice?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. All right, welcome everybody. This is the March 14th CVTA Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We will start with roll call and certification of quorum. Ms. Firestone?
Yes, sir. Town of Ashland, Miss Amos. Charles City County, Miss Russell.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Goins. Hanover County, Mr. Badunez.
Here.
Flag. Henrico County Chair Yor.
Here.
Miss Smidler.
Here.
Mr. Sauter. Miss Ledoux.
Janice, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me better now? I've just sat forward a bit. New Kent County, Mr. Stauder. Miss Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine. City of Richmond, Miss Clark. Mr. Bridewell. DRPT, Mr. Brule. Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Thank you. VDOT, Mr. Mann.
Here.
Mr. Riblet. Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. GRTC, Miss Torres.
Here.
Miss Zink. RMTA, Miss Dean. And Plan RBA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Thank you.
Mr.
That
Goin
concludes
is-
the roll call.
Mr. Goin has joined us as well.
Okay, wonderful. I'll make a note of that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Janice. Next is the opening statement regarding virtual participation. This is still a virtual meeting. The statement is included on the website. Next item would be consideration of amendments to the agenda. Chet, do we have any amendments?
No, sir, no amendments, thanks.
All right. Next item, approval of the February 14th CBTA TAC meeting minutes. If everybody's had a chance to review, we would entertain a motion.
This is Barb. I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Barb. Do we have a second?
Second.
As the second from Joe. All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. Next would be public comment period. Do we have anybody registered for public comment? All right, seeing none. Next item would be the TAC chairman's report. I have nothing to report other than Happy Pi Day. Next item would be the TAC staff update. Chet?
Thank you. I just wanted to provide a brief overview of the Finance Committee meeting from the 9th. Yeah, Wednesday, March 9th. The regular kind of updates were provided, financial activities and investment reports. And then there was an introduction to the new financial advisor firm that has been selected by the authority, PFM. So they were present at the meeting to basically just introduce themselves and make sure that there was a connection with the Finance Committee as they started to move forward to the next opportunity to interact, and that will be at the March authority meeting. They'll be on the agenda again to do an introduction for the full authority at the end of March. Brief overview of FY23 budget and how that fits in with everything. The authority is moving forward with interviews and with solicitation for an executive director, and the proposed budget needs to be reflective of that, with the assumption that benefits, insurance, all that kind of thing will be handled by Plan RVA, much like some of the other activities that happens, as the CVTA doesn't have to create all of that fresh. Insurance renewals, and then looking at the draft administrative and operating expense budget, there will be a public hearing on that, and it looks like that will be the same time as the same meeting as the public hearing on the draft regional funding plan at the April 29th meeting. And then there were a few budget amendments to reflect the contracted services that RDS is currently doing for CBTA, so that was identified out of contingency and into a specific line item for contracted services. That's the quick summary of the Finance Committee. There was also an overview of kind of what we knew at the time in regards to some of the things later on with today's agenda regarding the certifications and the FY23 local allocations plan and those kinds of things. That's my update, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chet. Any questions? Seeing none, next item would be item 6, regional project prioritization. We have an update on both scoring as well as the third-party estimates.
Yes, thank you very much. We included the pre-cost validation scoring results in the agenda packet on page 6. It should have been linked in the PDF as well. So there were 4 different categories as outlined in the guidelines, and the scoring results prior to having the verified, finalized, validated cost estimates. We expect to have those by the 17th, so later this week. Once everyone has had a chance to review and meet with the consultant, and I think everyone has, for the most part, if you had requested that. So I think we're moving on schedule in terms of trying to get things set up for the April 29th public hearing. The big action by TAC is going to happen at your next regular meeting in April to make sure that everything is good in regards to a draft spending plan and all of the things that we want to have included for the public hearing. I know Miles is with us, but he is an attendee. Miles, I'm trying to promote you to a panelist. We do have the option to look at the spreadsheets if there are any questions, or if there's anything that you all want to look at in detail regarding the draft that was sent out with the packet. Mr. Chair, that's the update on 6A. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on scoring? Barb, you have your hand up.
When will we get the scores with the validated estimates?
If we get everything back on the 17th as scheduled, Miles, I expect we could have it turned around on Friday. Is that reasonable?
Yes, I think Friday we can get that back out to everyone.
And is that when people will have a chance to adjust their request, their funding request?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you do want to adjust them, yes, we would certainly take that. I mean, I think TAC probably needs to have a discussion about how long that window is.
Yeah, that was
We
my
haven't
next
really-
question.
Yeah. I don't recall us setting up anything previously, so I think that's a decision that TAC should probably consider.
Right, so yeah, if you can pull up when our next meeting is and work it backwards so people know when they have to get that leveraging.
Well, the next meeting would be April 11th, Monday, the 11th. So there are a couple weeks. And I think ideally we'd love to have everything with 2 weeks in advance, so maybe the 28th.
Does that give everyone enough time if you need to go back to your board or something?
Does anybody have to go back to their board for adjustments?
No, this is Tom. I mean, we'll work with whatever deadline is put forward. We just like as much time as we can have as we consider this.
Anybody else have any feedback on that timeline? Joe, you had your hand raised, but you're muted. Do you have a question?
Now I'm unmuted. So we met with the consultants that were doing the estimate reviews this past Friday, and based upon that meeting, want to make some minor adjustments to our estimates. So Chet, we'll try to get that, but to you as soon as possible, but we haven't received the revisions from the consultants at this point. Is there a time frame you're trying to hit?
Well, the consultant is supposed to have everything wrapped up by Thursday. So if we can have, I mean, I think that the hope is that we have all the estimates updated by that time, so that once we have the costs, the finalized costs, we can turn around the revisions to these sheets pretty quickly. That's why I just said when Barb asked earlier, if we have everything we need by the 17th, we could turn around in a day.
Okay, so just mechanically, I was expecting to receive the revisions from the consultant and then submit to you our final estimates. We may not necessarily accept the consultant's recommendations for, every single aspect of our estimate.
Right. I
That's
think
my point. So I think it needs to come from the applicant with being informed by the consultant.
I think that's what Barb was asking too.
Now, I think her question was different because she was,
Okay.
I don't want to speak for Barb, but it sounded like she was talking about maybe adjusting how much money they put in for leveraging based upon. And what I'm talking about is we submitted cost estimates. Those estimates have just been validated. We met with the consultant on Friday. They're going to, based upon some information they provided, they're going to change a few things in their validated estimate. And then we're going to resubmit revised estimates based upon that validation.
Yeah, that's a different question than what Barb asked, but this has come up offline, Joe. So Chad, if you want to speak to Joe's point.
I think mine is pretty straightforward. I think you've answered that, Chad. As soon as we get the revisions back from the consultant, we can turn it around in less than a day.
Yep.
All right, other questions? And Janice, I see Nora was in the chat box trying to get moved over to panelist.
I think something must be going on with her Zoom because I've sent her there she's coming over now. I've sent her several, but she wasn't receiving them.
Got it. Other questions? Sharon, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I had a question about the scores for the highway, specifically Staples Mill Road improvements had a safety score of 0. And I know there's been some injuries, serious injuries along there. So I wasn't sure how it ended up with a 0, or if this is the appropriate time to bring that up.
Sure, I can address that, Chet. So Sharon, that was actually taken from the STAR study. So the CMFs were broken down by segments and intersections in the STAR study. And so it was essentially the sum of all of the sections that were included in your project area. So I think it was reduced from what was in the broader STAR study, but it was basically just taken directly out of the study that was provided as supporting material. So it's the approach we've taken is anything that was negative or 0 is just a 0 value. So there's no reductions or anything like that. It's just that there's a floor of 0.
And so there were no injuries or no.
So the issue, I think what it was is that the intersection with the triple rights, and I think I'm thinking of the correct project here, as increases the crashes over the long term as opposed to the current design. And the net between that and the benefits of the other pedestrian improvements was on the whole negative, I think. And I'll have to go back to confirm that, but I believe that was why there was a 0 on that project.
Okay, maybe we can talk offline about that. And so, since the STAR study's been performed, I think there's been a fatality out there as well at Bethlehem and Staples Mill.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk more.
Okay, thank you.
So to the broader question or point that Sharon raised, if there's any questions or concerns about discrepancies in the scoring itself, we can, I guess applicants can follow up offline with Miles and Chet. Do you want to try to have any comments or questions raised by that by this Thursday, I assume, as well, as soon as possible? I see you nodding your head, Chet. Is that a yes?
Oh, yes, that would be fine. Sorry.
Okay, great. Dorana, you have your hand raised.
I do. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So one of my questions is, with the revisiting of some of the estimates, are we at all, impacting the overall prioritization process with kind of revisiting and adjusting numbers? Or do we think it is, clearly a review? Just with some of these adjustment questions, I was getting a little bit unclear on, what is submitted versus then third-party estimate coming in. I just want to be clear on what is happening here in the process.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Chet.
I think that, Dorana, that's a great question. And we have not adjusted any of the estimates based on, aside from what you see on the screen or in the packet. So I think once we have those numbers, we'll be able to have a better idea of any changes in scoring the benefit cost. I would think that Barb's question would weigh in there too, if there's a change in what the request might be. All that's going to factor in, but at this point, we don't know what those impacts are.
To answer your question, Dorana.
Yeah, it still says that we're after the scores have come out, we are adjusting, and it just leaves way to, in the future, if there's some differences in how we approach it, just making sure that it's just, the fair and correct way that we're approaching. Because again, it's like we're revisiting it, and what if that impacts the benefit cost and moves another locality's projects above another that aren't making these changes. Just putting that out there.
Barb?
So what's included in the agenda packet are the projects with the estimates that were included in the applications, right, Chet? So these aren't the validated estimates.
That's
But
correct.
I had similar concerns, Dorona, with how does it work if the third party says your estimate's not right? And, you know, how does that fit into the process? Todd and I talked about that, didn't we, Todd? And I think what we were feeling at the time, and it's not really written in the process, so we probably need to address this when we revisit the process and get it clarified. But if a jurisdiction can justify changing the third party estimate, if there's good justification for it, then we would go with the locality's perspective because they know the project better. Is that right? Todd?
Yeah, if I could respond to Barb's question, Dorona, then follow up with you if you have additional. So yeah, that actually, we have had offline conversations on that specific item and loop chat in. So basically it's you would assume the applicant, in this case the localities, have the most knowledge and experience on developing these projects and the project scopes and estimates, while the third party review was much needed and may be helpful in many respects. I mean, keep in mind they were reviewing at a very high level, 30 some applications in a very, very short period of time. So it was a very high level effort that while necessary may not be perfect. So the conversation we had was that if a locality defends or wants to defend their estimate that they submitted, and it's I guess logical and kind of passes the smell test that the locality's estimate should prevail. That was kind of the nature of the conversation. Barb, you want to add to that?
Dorona, do you want to say something before we?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Barb, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess it's 2 points. It's one, if the locality's estimate is going to prevail, what's the purpose of the third party estimate? And then two, weren't the localities to speak with the third party and, resolve, was it just when you met with the third party, there was just completely polar difference in what you came up with? Because, when we met and we talked through some of the assumptions and some of the things that we had that could have skewed their interpretation of it, that's what we talked about in that meeting. So were you all's meetings was it just so different that there couldn't be a resolution amongst the third party and the locality?
I can speak to how Henrica's went. I mean, for the most part, we agreed with the third party validation. A lot of it was right-of-way focused on basically cost increases on the right-of-way side, but there were other components that they just didn't have that level of detail to review in their estimates. So in some cases, we felt that we had grounds to support what we had submitted. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I welcome input from others that have been through that review process.
I can jump in.
Or
One of the recommendations we didn't agree with for a PE only, because we have a fee for a project that's actually more complex than that particular project. So we're pretty confident that our request was in line. The other one, we agreed to the cost increase suggested by the third party. So even though we're saying the locality would prevail, I think that it's incumbent on the locality to read through the comments and to consider them and have a conversation with the reviewer and try to come to some resolution. But if there's a stalemate, then, it would be with the locality. Something that might help is just to put together a table of the projects and the estimates submitted with the application and the third party recommendation, and then the final, just for transparency, so that people can see where those adjustments have been made.
I think that's a good suggestion. Is that something you can do on your end, Chet?
Yeah, that's actually kind of what we were thinking we would do once we got everything back on the 17th. Provide that comparison. Mr. Chair, I think that just to step back, I think the overall intent here is to make sure that the authority commits to projects that make sense and are realistic and are the best use of the regional funding pot. So I think to editorialize, the purpose of having the third party review is just to provide some transparency and feedback on the initial cost estimates to ensure that everything is realistic and agreeable to the jurisdictions. But the point earlier about you all being the ultimate deciders, staff would concur with that, because I mean, the local jurisdictions are where the projects start, and you should have the most experience and the most information related to each individual project.
Mr. Chair, one last comment, please. Maybe when we do consider in the process in the future that we have at least some percentage, maybe percentage cap on that locality discretion, just to stay in line with the whole process of the third party estimate. So, the request, because ultimately you're saying, we had one where we requested a certain dollar amount from the authority and they're like, well, the project is under, so this needs to be your request amount. And so that ultimately, that has to be a decision on that adjustment. And then if we were to say, well, no, we want the estimate that we have, then I think that there potentially could be like a 10% cap over what the third party says, or something that we start to consider, because they are kind of looking at it for, the best use of the funds, and the request that's happening kind of, in that format. But again, I think it's definitely for the future process. And again, 10% could be a bad number, but maybe just something where we at least are taking somewhat of their input into consideration for the authority.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, certainly we'll need to revisit the process and maybe include some guidelines on that going forward. Barb, you have a comment or question?
We're trying to keep a laundry list of stuff to go through when we look at the framework document again, and we'll put that on there, the percentage, and also just the fact that we need to kind of outline better how we're going to handle the third party reviews.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? All right, we kind of covered 6A and B together, overlap, right, Chet? So question, I guess, for Chet. So where are we on the finance side with respect to what the allocation will be for this round of regional funding? I know there's been a presentation through work from the finance working group to the finance committee as well as the full authority, but I guess I'm looking for feedback on where that discussion is and where what the time frame on having those numbers looks like, or is it the...
Those are great questions, Mr. Chair. I think at this point we don't have direction from the authority on it, or the finance committee on any particular direction to choose as we move forward with the scoring and having those calculations in place. We could certainly work out options as we look at the draft funding plan that'll go out for review. I think at some point it would make sense if it's a TAC, initiated with TAC or with finance, to have a recommendation one way or the other. Or if that's a finance director's working group decision, I think those are all viable options in terms of which way to go. That could, honestly, if it wouldn't cause too much confusion, you can go to public hearing with options, with a selection to be recommended after that's over, or you can take the other route and use your best information to make a recommendation to go forward with public hearing with one of the options. But I think coming out of this week, staff's direction is that we'll come up with the numbers and how it might work either way, whether that's a straight pay as you go or a 10% debt or whatever that direction might be. But we don't have that overall guidance at this point.
Barb?
Do you expect the authority at the March 25th meeting to make a decision about the 10% bonding?
I don't expect that to happen unless they're given a recommendation one way or the other.
As there was no, go ahead, Barb.
I've gotten the impression from finance that they really want it to be an authority decision, and I don't know. And the next finance meeting is after the TAC meeting. So, I heard what you said about having options for the public hearing, but we do need to get a decision on that.
Thank you, Barb. So Chet, just for clarification to the group, because I know this has come up. So the allocation years for this part 2 or B or whatever it is of the regional funding was years 2 through 4, which would be FY 23 through 26, correct? With years
That's right.
1 and 2 being dedicated to the fall line.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that would fill out the first 6-year plan, and then next year, per the framework, we would pick back up with additional allocations based on balance entry, as well as pick up the next year, which would be FY 27. Is that the intent?
Yes, we think so. Obviously, that's up for discussion, but the commitment of funds and I mean, we could probably have a totally separate meeting just about this topic, but the framework moving forward, I think is important to capture sooner rather than later, so that everybody understands what the timelines are going to be, and hopefully we can get into a more routine schedule once this first round of commitments is made.
Gotcha. Barb?
So in the code, is it 4 years or 6 years? I was trying to look it up while you guys were talking.
In the code, it's suggested to use a 6-year.
So FY 23 is coming up July 1. So wouldn't we be building a FY 23 through 28 right now?
That's a question to be answered. We haven't committed the FY 21 and 22 until 3 months ago. So the next cycle might include multiple years if we wanted to try and, I think that's something that we need to figure out, because we're catching up right now to revenues that were collected 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're at a point where we could build a 6-year plan that is kind of in line with the point of time that we're in.
That's why I asked the question, Barb, because I don't think it's clear based on either the code or the framework or any direction that we have been given, to my knowledge. Chet, feel free to correct me, through either the full authority or from the finance committee as to what the options are. I know that it has been presented to one or both of those, both the authority and the committee, that this second phase of the regional funding allocations would be for FY23 through 26. But I don't know that's been fully laid on the table, kind of those different scenarios that we just kind of hit on.
Real quick, there is a CVTA meeting this month, right?
Yes, the 25th. So less than 2 weeks. So I'll leave this to the group. Is this something we need to put in front of the full authority for guidance and clarification on, as far as what years we wish to allocate? As well as, I guess, back to the earlier question about how much, whether it's all pay-go versus bonding up to 10% that was approved for consideration, as well as the balance entry amounts, which we have some guidance that was adopted in the framework document. Any thoughts, opinions, questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Chad. If it makes any difference, we have the revenue projections that were provided by VDOT that the authority assumed and adopted as the official revenue projections go through 28. So it wouldn't be a huge lift to change that period if that's the direction the authority wants to go before we get to that April public hearing. It's just a matter of, when we come up with a funding plan, looking at 2 additional years, assuming those additional revenues for 27 and 28.
Right, so it may be good if we're giving them different scenarios and options for allocations, that perhaps it's appropriate to give those 2 additional years as an option, based on the fact that we have projections, based on the fact that the intent is to develop a 6-year plan. And I guess it's open to interpretation whether that 6-year plan is rear looking, since we never developed an initial one, versus forward looking from this allocation year. All right, other questions or comments on this item? All right, hearing none, we can move on to item 7, FY21 annual certification and FY23 expenditure plans. Jeff.
Thank you. This is the most exciting part of the meeting for everyone, I'm sure. I just wanted to provide a quick update. We have the FY21 annual certifications, the signed memos from every jurisdiction, as well as GRTC. So thank you all for working that through your internal systems to get those done. The other 2 things to raise, we have FY22 quarterly reporting, which I included what we have to this point draft in the packet. If anyone has additional reporting that they would like to provide to add to this, please get it to me as soon as you can, so that we can keep an accurate accounting record of funds that have been spent so far. Thank you to everyone who has submitted information, and obviously we know that not everyone is spending their local revenues yet, so it may not apply to everyone. The last thing I had was the third kind of item of information, 7B. We have draft information from all but 4 jurisdictions for the FY23 local allocation plan, which is essentially the outlook for FY23 in terms of where everybody expects to be spending CVTA local dollars. And I know that some of those are still underway. I will, and if I have missed anyone, I'm going to read out the 4 jurisdictions that we don't have information from so far. I know I've talked with Chesterfield, and I know that's in progress. We will include that when we get it. Tom, I don't recall having anything from Goochland. Rhonda, if there's anything from Charles City, or Nora, if there are FY23 plans for Ashland. Please get those to me when you can, so that we can have that ready for review and approval by the authority. Again, this is for expectations on funds that might be spent starting July 1 through the next year. Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to take any questions, but that's kind of just the update on where we stand with all of those items.
Thank you. Any questions on either of those items?
Chad, when this is also with Goochland, when do you need that FY23 expenditure report? When would you like to have it?
I would like to have it tomorrow, but I think that realistically, if we
how about the end of the week?
Yeah, that would work. End of the week
All right.
would be great. We'd like to get it in the packet if possible for the March 25th meeting.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank you.
Barb?
Our plan is kind of tied to our budget and CIP, which is happening in April. I might be able to get a draft though for you to include in the March agenda packet. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Since it's a sort of a living document that each locality has the opportunity to update as the year goes on, maybe that helps solve your timing issue, Chad, is if somebody needs to get adoption through their CIP or through their board, that it can be labeled.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is it's a dynamic plan. So you want to get draft projects in, we can label them as draft, or we can wait. We can put a note saying tied to the CIP. From my standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of difference as long as we're trying to be as transparent as we can.
Also, you had item 7A. You're requesting action on this for recommendation to accept the FY21 annual certifications. So
Yes, please. Thank you.
And this is to make a recommendation to the full authority for their approval.
That's correct. At the March 25th meeting.
Got it. So if everybody's good with that, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Do we have a second?
Second, Barb.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All right, Janice, do you mind doing a roll call? You're muted, Janice.
Janice, we can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was unmuted. I'm not sure what happened, but let me get back to the other screen and we'll call Miss Amos.
Aye.
Miss Russell. Miss Russell. Go back. Miss Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Vadunez.
Aye.
Chair Yor.
Aye.
Mr. Stauder.
Aye.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
That concludes the roll call for that item. Ms. Russell is apparently not with us any longer.
Got you. Thank you, Janice. Next item would be item 8, following working group update. I'll start out on this and chat, or Shane, if y'all would like to jump in at any point, that would be great. Following up on the March 2nd fall line working group meeting, which is a subgroup of the CVTA TAC with all the directly impacted localities. There was a lot of work done on VDOT side with respect to looking at some project delivery options and project sections that make sense for possible advancement through various methods, either design bid build or design build options. I think 3 were specifically called out, and the map that VDOT developed is included in the back of this agenda. Chad, I don't know if you're able to share your screen at some point for the group, but I'll keep talking in the meantime. So there was much discussion on those different options, and then follow-up discussions amongst the various member localities, as well as with VDOT staff. So the end result of that is proposed recommendations to bring forward to this group for recommendations with any adjustments or changes to the full authority at the March 25th meeting to keep the full line project moving forward. So thank you for sharing the screen. So Chet or Shane, do you want to kind of pick up and talk maybe at a high level about the different packages we have here on the screen and what the consensus is to move forward, hopefully?
I'll gladly defer to Shane.
I was scared you were going to do that, Chad. Yeah, VDOT looked at the whole alignment like Todd mentioned. We tried to find some segments that were fairly contiguous and also limited on right-of-way impacts or number of parcels, so that we could quickly advance and get some items on the ground. There were 3 suggested packages, one being the southernmost portion of the trail, which Chet has on the screen there. I think the value of that project was roughly $31 million. There was a second option, which we termed package 2, which was the northern end of the trail, continuing from Ashland down through Hanover and slightly into Henrico. Value of that project was about 12 million plus or minus. And then we had a third option, which I'm hoping Chet keeps getting. Yes, thank you. Which was in Chesterfield. And the value of that segment was about $27 million. After looking at the 3 options that we had proposed, the group decided that option or package 1 and package 2 were the best options to move forward. And I just got some late breaking news. The southernmost portion will be receiving an additional $2 million in federal funds from Senator Kane and Warner as part of the latest federal spending bill. So that's another $2 million we'll have for the southernmost section coming out of Petersburg into Colonial Heights and Chesterfield. So Todd, I'm not sure what else you would like me to say. Happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you for that, Shane. Questions for Shane on the proposed packages? All right, not hearing any. There's also been discussion between the VDOT and City of Richmond on removing some of the city sections forward. So I'm not going to pick on Shane again unless he wants to volunteer, but Dorona, if you have any update on that discussion and what an option might be for some of the city sections at this point.
Sure, thanks, Todd. Well, the city was able to get the new alignment, which was the change in the Manchester Bridge from the T. Potterfield, and then I think 3rd and Duval, as well as 7th Street, through council resolution in regard to our innovation district. So we have submitted that, and this ask is for, let's see, an operational analysis and some preliminary design that would assist the city in getting more prepared for a design build or design bid build in the future. So we did want to have that programmed in the first portion so that there would be some segments of Richmond moving forward as we look to program some of the available dollars.
Thank you for that, Dorena. Did y'all collectively come up with a dollar amount to initiate that effort?
We did. And Shane, do you have that? I want to say, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I want to say it was probably a total of 625,000 to 700,000, I believe is the range. I don't know if Liz.
Unfortunately, I do not have it, and Liz and Mark are on other items this morning or this
Yeah.
afternoon, so I apologize.
And would it be best, I guess, I have it via email. I think they were updating it into one quote because right now it was in two separate, but I can forward those two scopes. But Chad, I think within the next, within this week, they'll be combined and VI can forward it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dorena. I don't think it's critical that we have it for today. I think just having a range is adequate because the action that's included in here for consideration for the TAC to send to the full authority does not have the dollar amounts specifically tied to it. So, but I think that would be helpful to have for the full authority on the 25th. So, and then going back and filling in the pieces back to the two packages that Shane described. In order to proceed with that, the CVTA authority will need to enter an agreement with CTB and VDOT for the development and delivery of these packages. So that's a procedural process that is necessary because of the funding mechanism and I think it's the first package in particular, Shane, because that's some of that's outside of the CBTA boundaries, then that would probably make the most sense for the allocation that the CTB provided for the Fall Line Trail would be the appropriate funding source for at least a portion of that. I think that was the 42 million plus or minus that CTB committed. So that would take CTB action in order to use that funding, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I think we would look to use the CTB funding for the areas that are outside the authority. Pardon me, I got a train coming by. And obviously, like I said, we just learned we're going to get another $2 million in federal money for that section. So that would free up an additional $2 million of that CTB money to go elsewhere on the trail throughout the other jurisdictions.
Very good. And then also, I guess the next step that's included is the fourth item under the requested action is to basically direct the Fall Line Working Group to continue to develop a schedule and spending plan for the remaining segments of the trail. So the balance of the sections in Chesterfield, the continuation of working with the city to figure out funding for the various sections within the city, as well as the Henrico sections, which at this point, Henrico is planning to continue to administer. And as we're moving through the design process, figure out the balance of funding needed to fully fund the sections in Henrico. So those are the 4 items at a high level that are included in this requested action. I'll take questions, comments. Dorena, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had one quick question for Chad. I don't see Eric on here, but I think it came up in my meeting with VDOT talking about the what type of agreement we would have with the localities in regard to the CVTA dollars. And I know we had the agreement for the local funds, but I didn't know if we ever came up with the agreement for regional.
I'm looking at chat. I know we had sort of some framework to develop that, but I don't think we have those agreements fully developed at this point.
I will follow up and figure that out.
But yeah, that's a good point, Dorona. That's going to be necessary for both the for all the locality administered sections that are using regional funding. So I think the bulk of the work has been done based on the other agreements that we have. It's just a matter of modifying them for this particular agreement. Other questions, comments? Barb?
I just wanted to give a shout out to Ron Spikowski for his hard work on that southern section in getting that $2 million of federal funding. I think that is a result of his hard effort, and we really appreciate it.
Since he's not on this meeting, we'll have to relay that to him otherwise, but absolutely. I think he has been joining our fall line working groups, right? So we'll I forget the date of the next one of those meetings. I think we have one coming up. We'll certainly give him a shout out there. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, we have a requested action. It's a lot of verbiage in there, but I think most of the impacted localities have looked at this at some point along the way and had discussions on it. So if everybody's good with it, we would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the 4 items included in the agenda item to the authority.
Thank you, Barb. We have a motion with some bells. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Janice, can you do roll call for us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ms. Amos? Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Budunez?
Aye.
Chair Ewer?
Aye.
Mr. Sauter?
Aye.
And Ms. Clark?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes that item.
Thank you, Janice. All right, next item is CVTA TAC member comments. Does anybody have any comments for the group? All right, hearing none, our next meeting is scheduled for April 11th. Chet, I assume we'll continue to be virtual or?
Yes, we'll continue to push for that as long as we're able to.
Okay, and then the next full authority meeting is in person with the virtual option at Plan RVA on the 25th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. All right, if there's nothing else, we may adjourn. All right, thank you, everybody.